Welcome to the Tearing It Up podcast. I'm your host, Taryn. We'll be tearing it up, tearing it down, and tearing it apart, dissecting all things related to those who deviate from the standard. From leaders of their industry to leaders of mediocrity, and maybe a gear review or two thrown in. We shoot the shit and let the conversations flow, so if that's not your style, this may not be for you. Otherwise, listen in. Hope to light a fire in you somehow. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Tearing It Up podcast in this wonderful Women's History Month. This conversation today actually wraps the month up with the last Thursday of March, and we have a great conversation with Andrea Kelly ahead of us. I actually just found out about her recently through another podcast, Justine Moulier's podcast, Creatives in the Wild. I was just blown away by their conversation. Everything that Andrea had to say just resonated with me so much, and I felt like would resonate with our audience so much. She has so much to say and so much to kind of teach us about the outdoor industry and size inclusivity particularly. So we're going to get this show on the road. Andrea, will you tell us where you are at physically right now in the world?
I am physically in the southeast corner of Portland, Oregon, in the northwest corner of the United States.
Awesome. Beautiful. A lot of our audience hails from that, as I originate from the Pacific Northwest. We're a little more north in Tacoma, Washington. But I love when we have guests that are really familiar with our area. Just another thing that we can connect on and chit chat about. So Andrea, you have a company, Make Plus Equal. And
That's
tell us
correct.
a little bit about what it is, what that is, and we'll obviously dive deeper into how you got started in it, how it connects to the outdoor industry, and all things about it. But give us the kind of quick and dirty rundown.
Sure. So Make Plus Equal is a consultancy in the apparel industry that specializes specifically in size inclusion. So I work with apparel brands, outdoors sort of where my heart is, but apparel brands across the board, and helping them become more size inclusive in the products they make, as well as the engagement they have with the community and the way they speak to a larger group of consumers that typically have not been served in the past.
Amazing. I love this so much, and I can't wait to dive in a little bit deeper because I know I have a few questions just at the top of my head with there's been a bigger movement around size inclusivity lately, and it's awesome to see, but there's also obviously a lot more work to do. But before we get there, we're gonna kind of back it way up into just the outdoors in general and how you got started in the outdoors, how you ended up in Portland. So let's just kind of start from that beginning there, where your outdoor interests got started at.
Well, it's interesting. My outdoor interests actually got started before high school, but in a very different environment. I was born on the East Coast. We moved to Southern California when I was in third grade, and I basically grew up on the beach. We were at the beach every weekend, Saturday, Sunday, in the water. And that was sort of the outdoor activities that my family did. We were, 10 minutes from there, and that's where we spent all our time. I ended up moving up to Portland for school. I won't tell you what year, but I moved up to Portland for school. And at the time, the people that I knew and the people in my community were very engaged in such different activities than what I had grown up with, because the environment here in the Northwest is so entirely different than in Southern California. My parents still laugh every time I say I'm going to take a drive to the coast, and they're like, "Why would you drive 2.5 hours to sit at the coast in the rain?" And I'm like, hey, you'll never get it. It's
Yes.
just a Northwest thing. And for all of us who are here, I know, Taryn, you get it.
Mhm.
We don't call it the beach for a
Yeah.
reason, because it's not the beach. I'm not laying out. There's no sunscreen. But yeah, I think with the diversity of activities that are available in the Pacific Northwest, between the river and the ocean and the mountains and the deserts and you name it, there's so many things to do. And it is interesting because now, and we'll talk a little bit like the activities that I used to do, but my activities now have shifted and spent a lot more time, I think, in the last 5 or 10 years camping, which was new to me. And, my friends had all the gear and knew all the things. And I felt like a rookie, and I thought, well, how do I not know how to do this? Oh, because we never did this as a family. We were at the beach. So there were definitely new things to learn, being in a different environment up here.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned the, camping kind of being new to you when you came up there, and I was thinking it reminded me that we camped when I was little, quite often, but then there was a long period of time that we weren't going camping. However, it wasn't really in my 20s that I was learning more about like lightweight, like backpacking camping, because
Hmm.
I'm like, wait, all my gear is so heavy and old because it was always like car camping. We were a family of four. Um, yeah, we were going out for the weekends or going out in our camper, like when my dad was working out of town and we went to the close to the job site and stayed near him and stuff. It was a different kind of camping for sure. So I can resonate with that, like kind of feeling like, wait, am I a late bloomer in this? Like in my 20s,
Yeah.
and I'm just finding out about all this stuff. And gear is just so expensive too that I was like, I don't know, those were things that I didn't really have access to or could fathom like spending that much money on a, new sleeping bag or backpack because that just those weren't really like the priorities. Um, but yeah, it felt a little interesting being in that, oh, I thought I knew what I was doing, but now I don't really kind of thing at like a what felt like a later age.
Yeah,
But now looking back, you're like, not even close, in your 20s is really when you start to figure most things out. And we obviously know we continue to figure things out well beyond our 20s.
exactly,
Yeah.
Yes.
exactly. And hopefully our financial position enables us to do more of those things, or we get even more crafty at
Hmm.
doing those things and being thrifty about it.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
getting involved in the industries or somehow that
Yeah,
you are able to get access to gear in an easier way. I mean, that's how I have done it the last 15
same,
years.
same.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So what all were you doing up in the Northwest besides camping and whatnot, other activities?
Yeah, so camping came much later, like I said. I think some of the first things that I took up when we moved up here was rafting and kayaking. Great rivers up here. I had some friends that knew what they were doing. Tons of guides up here. Actually got into mountaineering. There's an organization, and I should remember how long Mazamas has been around, but there's a climbing organization that's been here for a zillion years, that actually had training courses, and you would take this, I think it was like an 8 or 10 week course that included not only book work and learning all the terms and everything, but also actually doing conditioning hikes so you could eventually summit a peak, which is how you graduated. If you first, once you summit a peak with a glacier on it, you get to be a graduate of the Mazamas. So joined the Mazamas, did lots of hikes, climbed a couple mountains in my earlier days. Got into snowboarding. Actually learned how to snowboard in Mount Rose many, many years ago. And like you said, because I was in the industry at the time, I was working for Nike, I was working for ACG, so I had access to a lot of the outdoor gear we were making in the early 2000s. And then moved down to Southern California and worked for DC Shoes. And I worked on snow apparel there. Busted out my old DC Shoes snowboard this past couple
Woo!
months to get up on
Look
the
at
mountain. So yeah,
you.
like to say, like the gear that I have, I'm glad I got it when I did. I got it at a real easy, cheap price way, way back. It still works. I think I finally bit the bullet and bought some new boots because my boots were about 15 years old. But yeah, definitely being in the industry makes it a whole lot more financially achievable
Hmm.
to jump into some of these sports and activities because they can be real pricey. Now, if I could just figure out a way to get a real good discount on lift tickets, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
Shoot.
It has been so long since I've been to the mountain. I took about a 10-year hiatus with work and kids and all of those things, and was dumbfounded how expensive lift tickets are now.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something.
What mountain did you go to most
So
recently?
Mountain Hood is our closest mountain here, and that's
Okay.
where I usually snowboard. When I moved up here, I had actually been skiing, and I'll say skiing. So much like when you were saying, how infrequently you camped. I did actually ski when I was in Southern California, but it was a youth group thing where we would take a bus to Big
Yep.
Bear once a
Hmm.
year, which is not enough time to remember. So every year that we went, I had to relearn it, right? Yeah. So I never really became a skier. I did start skiing here and renting equipment we were up at Timberline and my friend blew out her ACL and then we were all done with skis for the rest of our lives and we moved to
Oh,
snowboarding. But yeah, Mount Hood Meadows is my favorite place. But yeah, I went up. I just went up for like a half day with a friend to screw around and see if we remembered how to do it. Like we did this all before kids. There were a bunch of us girls that used to do it. She's like, "Do you just want to go up to the bunny slope today and just like see if we even remember how to do this?" And the bunny slope was like $100. I'm like, "It's the bunny slope.
Woo!
It's one chair." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Didn't it used to be like 20 bucks?" And I was like, "Oh, I feel so old now. I feel like that little old lady in the rocking chair, like, get off my lawn. Why are things so expensive in my day?" So yeah, it's I'm pretty shocked about the prices. But, you know, I'm grateful that I already have the gear. That makes it a lot more affordable for
Yeah.
sure.
And you're definitely not alone in that feeling. I think that there has been a crazy change in ski hills recently that have just bumped the prices out the freaking window, and it's just changed the entire industry, I think.
Well, and I mean, my assumption is that they're still probably trying to recoup from when everything was shut down during COVID. They lost
Ah,
so much money, right?
yes. Yeah.
Although ironically, more and more people got outside during COVID because that was really the only place that we could be. But I do remember the ski resorts took a huge hit just being
Yeah.
shut down for a season or two, and then weather is so sketchy. So I
Yes.
imagine they're doing what they can to stay in business, as we all are,
For
right?
sure. Yep.
Yeah, it's just nutty out there. We talk about that with the ski industry a lot of, you can get into it fairly inexpensive if you're thrifty with gear and stuff, but it's really hard to get around just the tickets itself.
Yeah. Yep.
It's insane. Well, Mount Hood is just still on its own, right? It hasn't gotten taken over by any of the big resorts like Vail
No.
or anything. So
Mm-mm.
it's on it. What are those daily lift tickets looking like these days?
I think weekend tickets are about 149.
Oh,
I ended up
wow.
buying like a 5-time pass, so I
Mhm.
bought it and forgot it and don't pay attention. But yeah, it's steep. It's
Yeah.
really steep.
Jeez Louise, that is
I know.
insane. Well, it's nice to feel, I'm sure, that when you got back out there, it was kind of, like the saying, like riding a bike, right? You didn't feel like, oh
Totally.
my God, this is awful.
Yeah, I mean my legs are burning. Like I'm like, oh, these aren't 20-year-old legs anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. But like the turns still connect. And I was like, ah, that's right. Okay, I remember this. Yep. Okay,
Yes.
I'm back, baby. It just like I
Yes.
forgot that joy of that feeling,
Yes.
and yeah, so it's good to be back, even though I'm not racing to see how many runs I can. I don't care
Right.
anymore. I'm going to take a
Yeah.
couple and
Yeah.
hang out and take a break and go do a couple more. Now it's purely for fun. I just the youth like ego. I've outgrown all that stuff. I just go and have a good time and hang out with friends and stuff.
So
Absolutely.
nice.
That's
So
the
nice
best
to get to
way.
that point.
Yep,
Hmm.
exactly. So you mentioned working with Nike and DC shoes and whatnot. What were you doing for them exactly?
So I got into Nike I got into what I do. So I've been in the apparel industry for almost 25 years now, and I got in through a very odd way. Um, I'm not a designer. I have no artistic capabilities whatsoever. I didn't go to design school. I didn't do any of those things. I came out of college with a psychology degree, which I studied that just because it was fascinating to me more than anything. And ended up working for some high tech companies in the late 90s when computers were still newish. And I ended up working for a software training company, and I would go on site and learn systems and tools and then train the employees on it. And Nike was looking for a systems trainer to come in and learn how they did their business and learned all their, custom programs. And I ended up training all the product line managers on how to build line plans in their system and all of the product developers on how to set up bills of materials in Nike's proprietary system. And in doing so, got to learn an awful lot about the business. I also got to interact with tons of different departments and was favored by a lot of management because I was teaching their teams how to be more efficient and effective. So sort of put me in good graces, but gave me a lot of exposure to the company, which was great. Um, and after about a year of training for Nike, because I was passionate about the outdoors, I connected with the director of development for ACG, and she had an opening, and she said, I didn't know that I didn't think I was qualified. I had no apparel experience. And she said, well, you know all of our systems and all of our tools. You understand how the business works. You know how all the different departments connect. I can teach you how to make a jacket. I was like, okay. And that's sort of where it started. So I started out as a product developer. And for those who don't really know the whole cycle, I'm not going to give you the whole cycle, but you have your merchandisers or product line managers up front who decide what products you're going to make to bring in the revenue that you're trying to achieve for that season. They then give direction with a product brief to the designers to say, hey, make me 4 of these and 2 of those and 1 at this price and so on. And then the product developer takes those sketches from the designers, the 2D sketch, and works with a factory overseas to turn it into a 3D prototype. So they send the jackets to the product developers. We fit them, we test them, we do all of those things. So that was the role that I served in my time with ACG at Nike. I was a product developer there, and I worked on everything from fleece to t-shirts all the way up to technical Gore-Tex outerwear over time. Did the same thing when I moved down to San Diego, working for DC Shoes. Much smaller company, which meant there was a much wider reach of things I was responsible for. So not only the development of the actual products, but working with the vendors to build the trims with our logos on them and the fabrics that we needed, and doing a lot more of that as well. And then when I came back to Portland, I took a position as developer, a senior developer at Columbia. Again, doing the same sort of thing, working on outerwear, working between the designers and the factories. And then I was in that role for 3 years with Columbia. I think that adds up. If I do the math, I think that adds up to about 15 years of product development. And then in 2015, I decided that I wanted to move to the front of the line and move to merchandising and product line management and be more part of the strategy and have more influence on the product that we were actually going to build and deliver to the consumer.
Wow, that is a lot.
It's a
A lot of
lot.
hats.
Who knew?
Was ACG, is that like the parent company or something that owns Nike and other brands, or what? Oh, okay.
Sorry, no. So at Nike, they have a zillion different activity departments. At the time they did, it was broken up by running and swimming and tennis and golf and all of these things. And ACG was the acronym for all conditions gear. So that was their outdoor division under the Nike umbrella. And it was apparel, footwear, and equipment. So there was a whole department that did all the hiking shoes and hiking boots. And then we did all of the apparel. And then there was another division that did backpacks and all those sorts of things. So yeah, it was considered a quote unquote sport within Nike.
Got it.
So subset. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't want to backtrack too much, but I was just like, okay. I'm curious what exactly that meant, but I didn't want to interrupt you during. So what was it that really made you interested in jumping to that like forefront into the merchandising in that side of things?
Yeah, I think a lot of it actually had to do with all the activities that I participated in the outdoors. I mean, getting into ACG from the beginning in product development really was because I was the gearhead at home who was online checking out all the specs at REI and like, do I want an internal frame or external frame backpack? Like I was the gearhead for sure. So to be a part of the development team was great because I could take a look at the prototypes and examine and think, oh, if we move that zipper, if we adjust this, or, finding solutions to make the product better. I think moving into merchandising, I did it for a couple of reasons. Primarily, I was ready for something new, honestly. I mean, I got to the point, I'm like, at this point, I don't need whatever. You tell me what the zipper's supposed to be. I had been doing that for a while and I was ready for a new challenge. I think because the departments at Columbia are super collaborative, I had a really great working relationship with the folks in merchandising, and we shared a lot of information together, and I think the energy of that environment to me, it was exciting, and I think it was a step even further to have even more influence about how we could grow our business, making the right product. So I think it was just the next step up, the next challenge for me, following my tenure in development.
Awesome. Well, so when you made that step there, what did that look like as far as like where were you able to get in? You were still with Columbia doing it.
Yeah, so I was still at Columbia, and at the time, I think they shifted a couple people in the organization, and the senior merchandiser that I had been working with, who managed all of men's outerwear, which was the biggest portion of the outerwear group, he actually got promoted to be a director, and his spot was vacant. And I put in for the role again in another one of those spots of like, well, I'm not really qualified. I've never been a product line manager. And, the entire team has gone to school for this. They've had these skills. They've been doing this forever. But I also brought in skills as a product developer that a lot of them didn't have. So,
Yes.
I think that's something that I have appreciated in my tenure at Columbia is the hiring processes that they use and the way they form their teams. They really do try to get a really good mix of people with different experiences because everybody else brings some new knowledge to the team, right? And I'd
Yeah.
had so much exposure in working with that team that I sort of got what it was they did. I had a lot of things to learn that I wasn't familiar with. But there were a lot of strengths and learnings and knowledge that I brought in my 15 years prior that I can contribute and share with some of the people in the team. But there was definitely a learning curve for
Yeah.
sure.
I bet. But I mean, you said you're not really kind of thinking in those moments you're looking at a role from the outside that you've never done, like, oh, I'm not qualified, but then thinking about all the ways that it intertwines with others, like, well, I have experience over here that these people don't have,
Right.
and this set of skills that they don't have. So I am a like asset to this team and can bring a different view into things.
Exactly.
Like
I
sometimes,
have
yeah.
something to contribute that's a little
Mhm.
outside the norm.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's amazing. And so how would you say, I know that we talked previously and make plus equal, it was something you were kind of working with and had your mind on for a long time before it was like your full jump ship. So is this step into the merchandising and that role kind of where it started to the make plus equal started to resonate and become it's like where it originated from?
It did, and it did for a couple reasons. I think well, I'll save the timing for that's the second part. One of the reasons was because I was getting to see a different part of the business. Instead
Hmm.
of having information handed to me and doing my piece and passing it on, our role was sort of at the front of the line to help plan the business. So I all of a sudden had visibility to a lot of other information that as a product developer, I didn't need to know. We
Hmm.
had these great tools and reports. I think it's Circana now. It used to be called NPD, would give out reports about, what the top 10 selling jackets are and what your competition is doing. And so we had a whole lot more visibility to the marketplace, which definitely opened up my eyes around competition and what was around us. But the other thing is that same timeline when I moved into merchandising in 2015 is when the Plunkett research study came out that said that 67% of women were plus sized. And that's when all the light bulbs went off for me. So what we haven't talked about is even though that I had been doing all of these activities and working for all of these brands up until that time, as I got older, as I had children, I started sizing out of the product I actually made.
Hmm.
And I struggled to find what I wanted, or if I found something at REI, it was a men's version, or it was the only piece left and it came in this awful green, but it was the only choice I had. And I sort of got used to it. I just figured that there must not be a lot of plus size people doing these activities. And this is the reality. We're niche and suck it up, sunshine, and take what you can get. So to me, much like everybody who is plus sized, I think when that article came out in 2015, I was like, wait, hold up. Wait, we're not the minority. We're actually the majority of people in the US are actually plus size. And I'm like, then why are all these companies if six, let's say 70%, if 70% of people are plus size, why are all these companies building product for 30% of the market?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
mind-blowing.
Like, wouldn't you want to make stuff for everybody and grow your market share and grow your profits? So,
Yeah.
so again, yeah, I think this all sort of happened in my merchandising phase one because I had visibility and exposure to all new information.
Hmm.
And that's when the information actually came out. That was the timeline of the Plunkett research article came out in 2015. And that's when all the light bulbs started going off. And because I happened to be in merchandising, and because Columbia already was making plus sizes, not in a big scale, but definitely like bestsellers and so on. I thought, you know what, I'm actually probably in the right place to maybe do something about this because I was in a position that allowed me to influence what product we took to market. Um, so I put together a pitch and told them all the reasons why and gave them the consumer insights on what it's like to be left out and how it feels to be marginalized and why are we only showing it to, 30%? And then I'm like, and by the way, if you actually sell to the 70%, there's a huge financial opportunity for us. We're already doing it as a brand. So Columbia already had the patterns. They already knew how to do the fits. We weren't starting from ground zero. I just said, please let me turn up the heat. And they said, okay, but do it on top of your full-time job and no headcount and no budget.
Wow. I
Yep.
mean, two things about uh that article. One is like thinking that it took till 2015 to come out, and
Yeah.
but at the same time is like 10 years later, I mean, it still feels like, yeah, there's the movement in a lot of brands. You see a lot more brands
Yeah.
going like into the larger size ranges and whatnot, but it's like, wow, not much has seemed to happen in 10 years when
It
you
is
think about
relative.
it.
It is relative. So, and funny, it was so funny. I think last week something came up on my feed. I think a post from like 8 years ago that I snagged from somewhere else and reposted or whatever. And it basically said, dear fashion industry, make it in our size and we will give you our money. It was dated 8 years ago. And I re-put it back in the feed. And I'm like, yep, still
Still
here.
relevant. Yep.
But to be fair, I will say I can now count 5 or 6 apparel brands in outdoor specific
Hmm.
that I can actually buy and wear now. That was never
Wow.
the case. Columbia was like the only one. Maybe Land's End, there are a couple of them, but so even though it seems like it's taking forever, there's actually progress to be made,
Yeah.
or there is actually progress being made.
Hmm.
The other
Yes.
thing that I will say, and we'll talk more about Make Plus Sequel, but so much of what I do is education, and a lot of it is educating brands on what plus size consumers are looking for and how to talk to them and how to respect them and how to include them. But the other side of it is talking to the plus size community to explain, here's why you're not seeing it. Here's why it takes so long. It's an
Hmm.
18-month cycle.
Right.
So I know you wanted it yesterday. I did too,
Yeah.
but it takes time to do these things. So it's still moving slow, but in relativity, like to see how many brands are doing it or trying it or succeeding at it, it's interesting because I actually was considering launching Make Plus Sequel and leaving Columbia right in 2000. And then the pandemic came and I was like, I think maybe I'll just lay low and stay
Yeah.
with my corporate job and keep my paycheck. But I was worried that once we got through all of that, I was going to miss the wave. I was
Hmm.
worried that all the brands were going to be like, yeah, we should do this. Okay, we got it. And by the time I got out and was ready to do this, there'd be nothing left to do. Yeah, that's not,
Yeah.
that is not the case. It's a tidal wave. It is not going to slow down.
Yeah.
There's so many brands who are working to get towards this and so many more to follow.
Yeah.
And again, I'm really grateful that I happened to be in the right place at the right time with a brand who was progressive, who already had the groundwork done,
Mhm.
and all we had to do was really just step it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing and really good points. I mean, I know too, being like in the outdoor industry, obviously not on like the product development side or anything like that, but having just a community and a little bit of insight into it. Like, I know it takes time. It's really hard to remember like how much time it takes. I mean, I'm sitting there as buyers are going through their line showing for, next year, and you're like, wait, like you forget what's even coming in by the time the shipment arrives in store. You're like, wait, I saw this a year ago. I don't even remember what we're getting. So it's crazy how far ahead, these decisions have to be made. So it takes time before it's actually like in the consumer's hands, let alone then any changes that have to be made. Obviously, there's going to be more time, and they're starting at a slower speed. Usually it's not just like, hey, here's a whole line in all these sizes. It's like, here's one product or two products or whatever,
Yeah,
five
here's a
in
small little
these sizes.
collection for
Yeah.
us to get started.
And in
Make
like
sure we're doing
a
it right before we go all in, all of those things.
exactly,
Yeah.
if the
Yeah.
financials matter and whatnot. Um, and it's, you also mentioned, just about like having to deal with at the time, not thinking about like, okay, this is just what I have to deal with because this color and this over here because I'm in a niche. I feel like even just as women, we fought for so long to get stuff for women in general of any size to have products made for them that were not just taken from men's and made smaller. They're
Oh, you
actually
mean shrink
made.
and pink?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like how
Yeah.
long did it take for the shrink it and pink it movement to
And it
like
still happens. It
it's
still happens. But
absolutely.
progress, right? We're getting there.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, then this is just another step that's feeling that way. So it's just like almost you got doubled down on of like woman and plus size. Like
Yeah.
you're definitely not being thought about, but plus size individuals in general. Yeah, you think they're not doing it, but it's like that catch 22 where you're like, well, how many people aren't doing said activities because they can't do it comfortably? They don't have the product for them. Whatever shorts, pants, or shirts or anything they're wearing like, is so uncomfortable to go on a extended like hike or bike ride or
Yeah.
snowboarding or skiing or something that they're just like, I'm not gonna do it. I've come across countless stories like that on the internet, blogs, articles, and things, and it's just like it's so sad to think about that that's what has stopped you. You have such this interest in the fact that you just can't find the clothing that fits well stops you from doing it. And it's
Yeah.
like, how can we be, yeah, how do
I
we
mean,
help
we
this? But
started talking about finances and
mhm,
funding being the barrier to participation. I mean, lift tickets are expensive, but when you can't even find the gear,
yeah.
and it's interesting because there's a fine line. Like if you look at it from an outdoor point of view versus like a fashion point of view, is it the end of the world that I can't buy that cute thing in my size? Maybe, maybe not. Depends. Like if I have a
Mhm.
function to go to, I don't know, people on the red carpet who are plus size, like thank God Christian Siriano is around dressing plus size people. That's their
Yes.
job. They have a
Mhm.
uniform they're supposed to show up in, and when it comes to doing things in the outdoors, it matters too. It's a sense of
It
protection.
does.
I mean,
Mhm.
when I came on board at Columbia, there was a women's ski pant, and it was a low price point ski pant with zero features. And I knew I was going to be sitting on my butt in the snow and I was going to get wet. So
Mhm.
I bought the men's pant. But I
Mhm.
spent most of the time riding, tugging and pulling and shifting and hoping to God the
Yes.
snaps didn't. And all I could think about was my gear and if it was going to fail me rather than enjoying the run.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
such a distraction. And then you think even beyond that, like, okay, I want to go rock climb.
Mhm.
If I can't wear a harness, it's
Mhm.
a safety issue,
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
and to your point about not feeling good, I mean, it is this protective armor, but if I know that I am leaving the house in less than what I need to do,
Mhm.
I've already brainwashed myself into having a lousy experience.
Yeah.
I'm
Totally.
not
Yes.
suited up for the mission,
Yeah.
you
Yes.
know?
Yeah, I love that you brought up the rock climbing thing because actually we went this was a couple years ago now, I believe. We had a little team outing for a climbing night, and so one of our reps brought some stuff, and my harness like that I had from 10 years ago or 10 years prior to that definitely didn't fit anymore. And then he was like, "Oh wait, I only have like these sizes." And I was like, "I'm not even as we've talked about, not I wear about between between 10 and 14 in pant sizes and
Yeah,
sometimes even 16 in like overalls or something now these days, but the way that I'm shaped, like where my weight is on like my waist and love handles, that makes fitting things super hard. So that's something that you could tell this guy was like kind of embarrassed when I was like, no, that's like this isn't going to fit correctly the size that
yeah,
you have. I was like, oh my God, you just don't think about that. And then it's like, yeah, what about somebody who's like considered plus size because I'm
yeah.
not in that. I know there's a term for it that what is that kind of in between
Oh, I call it size purgatory.
okay, yeah, okay. I like
Because
that. Yeah.
if you're like in that 12, 14 range, do you shop in the straight
Mhm.
size section? Do you shop in the plus size section? My poor friend
Yeah.
Carolyn has to shop in both, which
Yep.
in some ways I'm sort of grateful for because that means that she gets to shop with me half the time instead of
Yeah.
being in a completely different department. I call it size purgatory.
I like
Yeah.
that
I
Yeah.
like
because
that a lot.
that just happened to me really more in the recent years that I even ventured into the plus size area on like Macy's or something. And I was just like, wow, it just felt I didn't the feeling that I had I was so conflicted because I was like, I shouldn't feel bad about this. But I
Yes.
feel like I'm being like pushed into this corner, like, oh,
Yes.
you're not good enough to be over here. So why don't you go in this
Yeah.
dark, dingy corner and see what we've got for you? And I was
And
like,
maybe if
why
you're
does it
lucky,
even
there will be
have to
something that you
be
like.
like why does it have to be plus
Yes.
size, like
Yeah.
in marquee over here? Like, why can't we just have women's apparel and like the sizes just go up? And especially the way stores arrange themselves, sometimes it's not just by brands or something like that, but if it is just by brands, that's even more reason to not even have a plus size corner, because you just have that brand that's maybe only in plus sizes right there in the middle as well.
Exactly.
Which, so that's where I can't wait to hear more too about what you do with retailers and whatnot. But yeah, it was such a mind fuck, because I'm like feeling bad about myself because I'm shopping in the plus size, but then I put this dress on and I was like, well, this is like super cute and makes me feel really good. And that's the thing, is when you
Yes.
feel good in your clothing, then it's just so much better.
Yeah.
But I was just like, I still had that confliction, like sort of, well, I had to like this, I had to get it from over here and not over here.
Right.
And like, are people, is everyone gonna know that this is like the, a 1X, or, and this one over here is like a 2X? And it's just, it's, I don't know why we have to make people feel like less than by
Yeah.
Yeah.
giving them
And
little.
looking at it as like shopping in the plus sizes versus finding something that fits your body,
Mm-hmm,
you
mm-hmm.
know?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, just getting past that hurdle, or being in the store shopping and everything stops at a large. Maybe there's one extra large and you're just automatically don't feel welcome. Like, okay, well, I don't belong here.
I'm not supposed
And
to be here. Yeah.
yeah, and that happens in so many stores, and especially outdoor stores. And again, it's something we've talked about a lot on the podcast, because it's it's something that we all deal with, and I know that people on the other end deal with it too, if not find like small or like very,
Yeah.
very
I,
petite
I
people.
have one of my best friends is petite,
Hmm.
and she has been hounding me since 2015. All right, yeah, do all that, but when are you going to make stuff for me? And I'm like, let
Yeah.
me get one off the ground.
Honey,
But the irony
honey.
is, she has the exact same issues. She's
Yeah.
like, the waist hits in the wrong place.
Yep.
Yeah, the sleeves aren't the length I need them to be. The proportions are off. It's the exact same issues, but she's just on the other end of
Other
the
side.
scale.
Yeah, because for then her, I bet instead of shopping like in the men's department where you might be happy to find more features, she's in the kids department where
Yeah,
that stuff is doesn't have the features, and maybe not as like tough and durable, because and it's a little less expensive because it's not as durable, but you're
right.
running through
Because
it
they're
just
going
as
to grow
much.
out of it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Well,
Um,
and for her, from the fashion side of it, she's a high school teacher.
mhm.
She's shopping in the same stores that her students are shopping in.
Right. Yeah.
How's that feel? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, where's your credibility as an adult, right? If
Yeah.
I'm like,
for
oh my God, I
real.
wore the same denim jacket that,
Absolutely.
yeah,
So much of it I feel like can be mental. Like there's safety issues, like, and it all goes into that mentality. Like you said, if you're skiing or something or snowboarding or whatever, and you're only worried about, are my pants gonna stay buttoned? Am I gonna rip through the butt right now? Like you're
yeah,
not enjoying the time out there, or you don't have the correct stuff to keep you feeling like dry, warm,
protected, yeah,
whatever it is, protected. Yeah. So again, that just goes into the mentality, the simple mentality of going into a store and not being able to find something that fits, or being over in this area. It's like, we the whole point of the outdoors and all this is like to feel good, and it's so good mentally for many people,
yeah.
yet just getting the gear that works is
It's
stopping
hard enough.
people. Yeah.
So I just posted last night on my website. I just started blogs. I just put my first blog up, and it's actually about an experience that I had last spring on a completely impromptu kayaking excursion.
Hmm.
Was it kayaking? Yeah, sea kayaking in Monterey Bay with the otters. I had
Fun.
planned on doing this thing at all. I didn't pack for it, and I'm like, there's no way I can go. I don't have anything to fit me. I don't even know if the boat's going to hold me. Whatever. I have like slacks and dresses and business professional crud. But I went to the outfitter the first day, and I'm like, I'm curious. I'd really like to do this. First, do you even have a boat that accommodates me? And he's like, I absolutely do. I'm like, really? And he's like, yep, I got boats, I got wetsuits, I got everything. And I was like, Okay, then I'm going to do that. Well, I'm going to figure out how to do this
Mhm.
because I didn't bring anything to wear.
Mhm.
But REI had recently come out with a size inclusive range. I'd already bought a couple pieces and I'm like, I bet I can go to REI and buy something off the rack that actually fits me. That never happens.
Mhm.
There's no way. So part of the fear of like, I'm on this chair and if I split my pants, I can't go down to the pro shop and buy another pair.
Right.
They will not have my size. So there's this desperation in it, right? So for me to be able to actually like look online and go, yep, in stock. I went to the store, I picked up the stuff, I showed up the next morning, I got in a boat, and it was amazing. That is not the norm.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
now the irony of it is there was another gal that I had sort of met up with who was there for this event who was also plus sized. And she was like, he says he has wetsuits if we want them. And it wasn't that cold, but I was like, sure. And he came, he's like, oh yeah, here you go. And he handed me this wetsuit. I'm like, dude, I'm not even going to try to get my legs in it. I'm like, I don't care if it's men's or women's. Give us the largest sized ones you have. And he was like, okay. Like I knew looking at it. So I got it to like my knees and I'm like, yeah, this is not going to happen.
Yep.
She tried it, got as far as she could, lost her balance, fell, ripped them wide open,
Oh
mortified. And I
no.
was like, okay, but this is not your fault.
Yes.
Mhm.
It's the
Yes.
gear's fault and it's the retailer's ownership and responsibility
Yes.
to provide the tools. Don't, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I'm grateful I didn't need a wetsuit at the time and REI was able to serve my purposes, but not, there's so much planning that's involved for us to do all these activities because there is no, oh shit, I
Backup.
forgot my
Yeah.
X. Oh, beanie? Sure. Goggles? Yep.
Yeah.
Gloves? You bet.
Gloves.
If I forgot my
Mhm.
jacket, I'm out
Yeah.
of luck.
Yeah. Also to your point with this and with your kayaking adventure, first of all, many people aren't even comfortable enough to go ask, do you have a boat that can
Yeah.
accommodate me?
Yeah.
Because they're embarrassed that, they have to ask at all and that the answer might be no. So
Yeah.
I think being the person who actually, being in the industry kind of too, that probably helps being more comfortable knowing that these
Yeah.
things exist because some people don't even know if they exist. If they've never been
Yeah.
kayaking, I was a zip line guide. And yeah,
Hmm.
it was like those positions, you had to make a call and there's a weight limit. It was the worst feeling ever when you had to pull someone and say, I'm sorry, but we have to weigh you.
Yeah.
And um and just knowing too that they probably knew that, but and then they have to wear a different harness and it just feels
Yeah.
like all these things are being called out. It's like, okay, people already can know and see like how much more
Yeah.
do I
They're
have to
already
go
looking already.
through? Yeah, to just to
Well,
be
and
able to do this
I even went through
adventure.
that same situation. I took my kid, we were back east one year and I took him to New York City. We went to Coney Island. And even though I grew up in Jersey, I'd never been to Coney Island. And we went on a bunch of rides and there were a bunch of rides I couldn't go on with him. The thing wouldn't shut. And I was like,
Wow.
well, have fun. I'll take pictures from down here.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like part of the fact that I'm in the industry, I feel comfortable enough to ask.
Hmm.
Partly because I've been this size for so long
Hmm.
that I have gotten to a point where I don't feel bad about it. I don't care if people judge me.
Yeah.
I'm significantly older than you ladies. You will get to a point where you don't give a shit what anybody else thinks
Yeah.
about you. So that helps. But
Yeah.
also, I'm a size inclusion advocate.
Yep.
If
Yes.
anybody's going to ask, it's going to be me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because not only do I have the information and the confidence and the wherewithal to ask about it, but also if you tell me no, I'm going to say, well, why not? We should probably talk about that. How can I
Yeah.
help for other people forward? Like it's kind of all who I sort of am now. I mean, I'm other things
Absolutely.
too, but yeah.
Well,
I
and
feel
that,
like something also needs to be brought to the table is how much responsibility gets put on the consumer and not the production company. You know what I mean? Like there's just all this weight that gets put on the consumer and the people who are making the big bucks could give two shits less.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it is definitely, it's a challenge.
Mhm.
There's just not a lot. There are not a lot of options for us. We're really, really limited. And that truly was the impetus to start Make Plus Equal, frankly, was I was really, really excited to be at a great place with Columbia. That side hustle job that they gave me on the side eventually rolled into an actual position that they created for me to manage. They took all the other stuff away and said, just do this. Like it was my dream job. But I also knew that like, okay, Columbia's kicking ass at this. All right, outdoor research is coming along. Great. This brand and this brand. But is that all we get to choose from? Like
Right.
Taryn, how many brands could you possibly buy a snowboard pant from?
I
Dozens.
just had this conversation yesterday actually that I was like, there's one now that an extra large that actually fits. Like,
Okay.
but like I said, I'm at
But
that
smaller folks, I mean, I could
exactly.
pull up random like European like zillions. I have
Yes.
Yeah.
four.
Every
And you know
option.
what?
Yeah,
One of them didn't
totally.
pick my body size, so their stuff doesn't fit me.
Yep.
Okay. So I know Columbia stuff fits me, but what if I don't like their color palette
hmm
this
hmm
season? Okay. Then where do I go? So to me, like uh, the whole conversation is even though we're the majority, we're not
hmm
asking you to give us the majority of the product. We just like to be equal. We want
Yep.
equal choices.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I was super stoked that we had great success at Columbia, but I wanted other choices. So
hmm
for me to take my learnings from Columbia and be able now to offer those services to other brands to give more people more choice, that's the goal.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And so just like your other positions where you had a different set of skills going into merchandising and all that, uh, you having all this experience in a body that's a plus size body, I mean, that goes right into make plus equal and being able to help others. And you have all this experience in your product development, your merchandising, working with Columbia, these other brands, plus the actual personal experience
Right.
to go in and speak like for these people. Because like Amber mentioned, feeling that the consumer has so much responsibility. So you are the consumer, but also have inside view of the brands, and not every consumer. Obviously, you can go out and write as many reviews as you want about like, hey, you say you're inclusive and you're not. That still takes a lot of time to reach the people it needs to reach
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
consumer end. So you were in, I feel like, such a unique position in being able to create what you have with Make Plus Equal. And you know that you realized that, which is, I assume, why you were like, okay, yeah, let's do this. I
I
need
gotta
to
go do
spread the
this.
word. I have to, because people want choices, and I know what it takes to help give it to them. So I'm gonna go out there. So what was that like for you to kind of realize like you needed to spread the wings past Columbia? How do you get involved with another brand or retailer? What was that first step like?
Well, let's see. We got the website up and running. I attended this networking event in Monterey Bay. It was the Sea Otter Summit, actually, is what it was. So it was a cycling community
Oh,
sort of thing.
cool.
So
Yeah.
lots of networking. The beauty is because I had worked at Columbia for such a long time, and because I had been in the outdoor industry for so long, I've got a lot of connections of people that I've worked with who've gone to other places. So a lot of the leads that I've gotten, and several of the clients that I've gotten have been word of mouth by folks that I knew. I was like, how am I ever going to get into this brand? And then somebody from that brand calls me, oh, because I worked with so and so. I'm like, oh, great. So that's been part of it. I've been really, really fortunate about that. But again, I mean, I'm trying to find business just like any other consultant does, right? Any other freelancer does through marketing and SEO and all of those other things that I'm learning about. So that's a whole new world for me as well as, I left Columbia thinking I was leaving to be a consultant when actually I left to be a small business owner that gets to consult sometimes. It's a
Wh-
whole different ballgame.
Yeah. It's wild
Absolutely.
how cookies uncrumble.
So
Oh my God.
what year was it that you actually left Columbia, if you don't mind me asking, and
Yeah,
decided,
I
yeah, I'm
left,
gonna start this?
I left my last day at Columbia was May 4th of 2022.
Oh,
It was recent. And then I launched, I think the following week after, maybe.
wow.
Yeah. And I mean, I had some things in the, like I had already started working with a branding person years before when I thought I was going to do it before the pandemic, and then I just sat on hold. So it wasn't like I was starting from scratch, but I made a couple calls and like, fire up the engines, we're doing this. So yeah, it's not quite been a year yet, but we're getting there. Oh my gosh, it's almost been a year. It's crazy.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. And well, you also just said, you thought you were going to leave being a consultant. Like this will be okay, not easy, right? But you have a view or vision in your mind of what you're gonna do. I'm gonna
Yeah.
consult for brands, maybe some retailers or whatnot, and
Yeah.
that's that. Then realizing like, well, if I'm running the show by myself, I am the marketer, the planner,
Oh my God.
the everything,
All the things.
and so that obviously you're putting on way more hats. You've already been used to wearing multiple different hats, but now you're just like, I don't even know what hat I'm pulling out of the closet today, but it's like we're gonna find out. So how do you go about even it's just you on your team, or do
It's
you
just
have
me.
oh
It's just
wow.
me. Well, and what's interesting about it too is, for the longest, like I was a product developer for 15 years. I was a merchandiser and product line manager for 8. Like I was pretty good at my job. This is the first time that I've done things where I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing with this. Like, oh my God, you crazy kids in the TikTok. Like, I can't. But
Yeah.
like, I would get
Yeah.
so fed up. I would spend so much time on a reel and I figured I had it out and I added this and then that got, and after like 3 hours, I'm like, I'm not doing the post. Like, I would just get absolutely infuriated. And of course, I could call my 18-year-old kid, but I think he'd laugh at me. Um, part of the way that I'm getting through all of this is I have fantastic community.
Mhm.
Some of that community has actually come from the freelancer boot camp that I took with Justine. So she runs, I don't know if she's still accepting applications, but she runs a 10-week, 12-week freelance boot camp course. And it's a cohort, and at least ours was a cohort of 10 women all in the outdoor industry in some way or another. One's a marketer, one's a web developer, one's a photographer for Nat Geo, you name it. Um, and we all got together and she walked us through how do you choose your clients? What are your values? How do you set your rates? How do you blah, blah, blah? And the class itself was great. Justine is absolutely amazing. But now I also have this community. So when I realized, oh, Google doesn't know my website exists, well, shit. Let me call the web developer friend and I bet she can help me. So she helped me with this and that. And then we're like, okay, now you need to go work on SEO. Why don't you call this gal who, oh, okay. So now I have this network of small business owner friends who are now like my work buddies.
Mhm.
I'm not sitting in the office with my team anymore, but this is my team now. Um, so that I am I'm so grateful for the people that I have around me. I have a friend who helped me build the website. Like I have people who I can go to, and if I fuck it up, I kind of give myself some grace because I'm new, man.
Yeah, and
You know?
you're a one woman show right now, of
Yeah.
course. So I mean
And you're
that's
learning. It's all new. Like you got to give
exactly.
yourself, you have to
It
give
is
yourself
humbling.
grace.
I haven't sucked at something in a really long time.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
that's
on the
gotta
other
be
side of figuring out how to navigate the suck is just a whole new you, which is like, I
Mhm.
think the most
Exactly.
exciting part.
Yeah,
Exactly.
a hundred
Yeah, I mean,
percent.
and I mean, there are a lot of things I'm learning now. Like, I'm not particularly a patient person. That's the lesson for me in this role. Like, boy, I'm used to like getting things done, and here I'm like send messages out and hope they come back, and
Yeah.
it's real quiet. I'm like, come on, and managing that anxiety of the ebb and the flow of it, like it's all new for me. And yeah, I will come out stronger at some
Yes.
point.
At
I
some
can,
point. That's
yeah,
where the grace part comes in.
Hmm.
exactly. I can absolutely resonate with that patience thing and just being like, okay, like where's this? And getting used to like planting the seeds and it takes a while for them.
They're
But
not going to grow any faster than they need to.
Yeah.
They'll
exactly,
bloom when they're
exactly.
ready. And I'm like, oh,
And that
come on, man. Can
uh,
I more fertilizer? Can
yeah,
I
more sun, what do you
more
need?
sunlight? What's it gonna take? Nope. They're
You'll
Absolutely.
gonna
figure
bloom when
out the
they're ready.
perfect recipe. You will.
Yes.
Well, and every one of those seeds is different, right? You might hear from
Right.
this person a year or 2 years down the line, or
Yeah.
you don't even hear from them directly, but they told someone else about you. Like,
Yeah.
Yes.
and that's how it came about. And seeing those things and believing that those things are out there is another thing that I have to keep on my forefront. But I learned about the freelancer boot camp through that episode you were on with Justine. And
Worth every penny and then some. I feel like I need to go back and like write her another check after the fact, just because I'm like, I
like
don't
a
know how I'd be
commission.
doing what I'm doing if I had not taken that course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I'm sure that was something really scary even too about going out on your own. It's like you've been used to working with a team for so long and now you're like, wait, who do I call?
Who are my
What,
people?
yeah, who do I call? Who do I ask for advice or help or just an opinion about when now it's just all on me. And but it's been only almost a full year since you've fully been in Make
Yeah.
Plus Equal full time, but you were also in the 20 most influential people in the outdoor industry in 2022. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, that was kind of awesome. That was pretty exciting,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Was
Outside
that the
Magazine. It was in 2022, which is now starting to feel outdated, but they haven't run that. That was the first time they ran something like that, and they
uh-huh.
haven't run them every other year. So,
I mean,
yeah, it was really exciting, and I think, to be in that class of people. There were some people I'm like, oh, I know who's going to be in this. It's definitely going to be Jenny Brusso. Of course, she was in there. I knew Patagonia was going to be in there. Of
oh
course,
yeah,
they were
yep.
in there. And I was like, and clearly Myrna Valeria was going to be in. And I'm like, well, why is Myrna not in the top? Oh, Myrna was on the panel of judges. That's why Myrna. I'm like, okay. So like, these are people that I've worked with and I've done events with and stuff. And like, there are similar people in the same communities. So like to be elevated and held up and featured in that magazine was like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. There's a reason I'm doing this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now you're full time, Make Plus Equal. What is it exactly? What's your overall like mission with Make Plus Equal? How can people second kind of part is like
Yeah.
how would people be able to support Make Plus Equal if you're not like that brand or retailer or whatnot?
So the mission is to give everybody equal access to the gear they need that fits their bodies, that fits their personalities, that fits their budget. I want everybody to have equal opportunity regardless of their size or shape. And the way I plan to approach that is by engaging with apparel brands, whether they're outdoor or otherwise, to help them build out their product size offering. Also engaging with the customers to make sure that they're actually building the stuff that the plus size people want. Like if you can't just say, here's what you can have. You really need to engage and find out what problems need to be solved and how you build those solutions for them. So that's the goal. How people out there in the ether, in the interwebs can engage and help make this happen. One, if you are a brand that is thinking about it or aren't thinking about it yet and don't understand about it yet, call me. Go to my website. Let's talk. You don't have to sign up. Like, let's just have a conversation. There's so much information that I can share that will get you sort of thinking about what the opportunities are. If you, same with a retailer, like maybe you've got product you don't know where to display it in the store. Like you said, how do I make it easier to shop? Same with online retailers shopping the site. How do I make it easier? Those are all sorts of services that I offer. So I know you and I talked a little bit, you touched on the fact that I bring consumer insights of, hey, I've been this person. I understand some of the struggles. I spent a lot of time early on keeping that quiet because I didn't want it to be the Andrea show. I didn't want it to be make this because this is what I want.
Mhm.
But because I'm part of these communities now and I can connect with those communities because I am one of those people, these ideas and concepts and insights that I share is representative of the plus size community. So there's that. But the other piece of it, as you mentioned, is I've also been building product for 25 years. So I know why it takes 18 months and I know what you need to include on the brief. And I know how to get around pricing if you're struggling. Like I know all the business aspects of it too. So everywhere from strategy all the way to go to market, anywhere in between. If you're a brand out there that maybe already has your plus size product built, but you don't know how to connect to the consumer, I
Mhm.
can help with that. If you're looking for an influencer that you want to work with to help broadcast and market, I know people I can connect you to. It's sort of everything across the board. And what I have seen thus far in this first year with the clients that I've had, nobody's picked me to do like the entire span. Somebody needs help with this and somebody needs help with that. And that's exactly what I'm here for. So whatever pieces of the puzzle you need help with as a brand, as a retailer, those are things that I can help with. As far as consumers, fans, friends, all of those, go to the website, um, get on my mailing list, send us messages, tell me who you want me to work with. What
Ooh,
brands
yeah,
do
okay.
you want to see? If
Yeah.
you know somebody in a brand and you've got a connection for me, by all means, drop that in a message too. Help me connect some dots so we can work to make more brands, more size inclusive to make plus equal.
That
Ding,
is
TM.
amazing. That's a round of applause. I love that. And that would just like came off your tongue just so I'm like like mic
Chef's
drop.
kiss. I've
Yeah,
said it a
chef's
couple
kiss.
times.
I love it. Yeah, totally. Um, well, I so your menu, it's kind of like you have an a la carte menu. Like you said, not everyone's make having you do every single thing. Some
Yeah,
people have balls rolling here or there, and they just need a little help over here. Or maybe it's just that, okay, let's just, how do I get started? And then maybe
yeah,
they'll come back to you about this, that, or the other.
sure.
Um, and the idea too of consumers, you might have a favorite brand that, or also you could be helping people too by just reaching out to you like, hey, we know it takes a while for to get these to market, so you may not see it from your favorite brand, for a couple more years, but you
Right.
can point them in a direction maybe that will, like, but this will suit your needs, like, just great suggestions or anything,
Hmm.
or um,
Absolutely.
you're just a wealth of knowledge in this industry as a whole, in the outdoor industry, not just the, little niche section of the plus size at all. So
Right.
I think you could be a great asset to anybody in that industry. Um, and you mentioned influencers, and I was just thinking, like, yeah, how many, brands or companies or anybody like these days, that's kind of the first place they go to is like social media. Let me see who is like what the movement is and who's doing it.
Yeah.
And can I reach out to them and they'll just be the magic key that like is, hey, here, get the word out. We have this, which could help for that. But like you said, what about the strategy behind the entire product itself? Like
Yeah.
you've
Yep,
got all those
exactly. Yeah. I
connections.
mean, and I am like I am so grateful for the movement that these influencers have built
Mhm.
and the folks I've gotten to work with. I think they were the first ones to start using their voices for others. And it's so important. And I think they still have a wealth of knowledge to offer. Um, I very similarly have that same background information. I've got a lot of connections, so we can certainly engage. But when it gets to the nitty gritty of actually running your business and actually producing your product or assorting your product line or selling to your buyers, I've got all of that in my back pocket too. So like we were saying, just kind of across the board from A to Z.
I love that so much. And
Yeah.
I feel like we could just with what you said, and that's a great point to wrap up, but I do have a couple of questions, at least one I want to get without hopefully getting too into the weeds because I don't want to keep you super long. But
Sure.
this goes way back to the 67% that first kind of report out in 2015. And from what I knew for so long was the average size for like women was
Mhm.
14, and now it is 16 to 18.
Exactly.
So if that's the average size, but so many companies are only making up to that, if that, like I see a lot of brands that actually only go to 14.
Yeah.
Um, so when do you have any idea when that 16 to 18 came about? Was that
I have seen reports from as far back as like 2016, 2017,
okay?
and of course, Google it online and you're going to get 27 different answers. But
Mm-hmm.
it has progressively been increasing. And in fact, if you take a look at growth charts and obesity charts, we'll put obesity with an asterisk in it
Mm-hmm.
because that's a whole other health conversation that we're
Yeah,
not going to get into today.
totally.
Um, the US population as a whole continues to increase in
Mm-hmm.
our rates. So we're not getting smaller as a
Right.
people. We are not staying the same
Mm-hmm.
as a people. We are going to continue to grow, and no amount of Ozempic is actually going to change that. That's a whole other thing we're not going to talk about today because
I
we
love
don't
that.
have enough time.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I mean, it has continued to grow. And yeah, I think it's interesting for a lot of the brands that I talk to. One of the big questions is, okay, well, if we do expand our size range and we do go into plus, where do we stop? Do we stop at 2X? Do we
Right.
stop at 4X? Do we stop at 6X? Like, where's the place to go? And for me, I think it depends on their long-term goals of
Mhm.
who they want to be and who they want to serve.
Yeah.
I see brands that are stopping at 2X, and I'm like, that's just not quite, come on,
Yeah.
go a little further because you're not even hitting, the meat of you're not hitting the meat of the market, the pinnacle of your size range
Mm-hmm.
there. Like, so, but again, it depends on each brand, it depends on their goals, their mission, it depends on the size of the company, you know, their agility, all sorts of things, and it'll be custom for each, but um yeah, I know I don't see that size scale going down
And yeah, and I
anymore.
just think it's an important point just to kind of throw out there because with the 67% um, stat that we had, that hits, but I also think just throwing those numbers out there for like our mostly like woman audience is just can be an important thing to know, like you have that size and just knowing that, okay, even if averagely I'm not seeing these sizes in a lot of these, especially outdoor brands, like you're not alone out there if you're that
Yeah.
size, and it might be harder because you might fall in that range that like I am, like you call size purgatory, but it's we're at that average, and it's just insane that that's the average, and it's like I said, hard,
Yeah.
but we know we've talked about all the struggles and whatnot. I just, like I said, wanted to throw it out there because those numbers I think can resonate with a lot of the audience, because even if you're not quite at them, but you're a 12 or a 14 and you feel like, yeah, as you get older too, it doesn't ever feel like it gets easier to get smaller, so then you're already thinking like there's nowhere to
Where
go.
am I
There's nowhere to
going?
go
Yeah.
past this. Like
Yeah.
what's gonna happen? The good news is like it's happened, like things are expanding. So if you're at that point, things are actually going to get better for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but and things are going to get available, but yeah, not alone out there in those sizes. Like we're here together. And one last kind of question I had was an article that just popped up this, well, I saw it before, but it re-popped up this morning that I wanted to ask about with REI's new non-gender line.
Yeah.
And because we touched on kind of how, you know that like, do you feel that's helping move the needle to size inclusivity or not? Because I feel like that it's just a whole nother conversation, obviously being a non-gender, but it's like, is it helping or not? Because then it's just like, okay, now we're just going kind of back in that area where it's like, here's a blasé thing that doesn't quite fit right because it's
I
not gendered. I'm just curious what your feelings are on all that.
and I've gone through that whole like, does it mean this or is it what that? Does it cancel? Like I've thought through all of that, and I think where I have landed on it, first of all, props to REI. I love
Mhm.
that they keep doing these groundbreaking things to try and change the norms. And
Yeah.
I'm so glad that even for a company of their size, that they are as agile and as nimble and as willing to take risks to try some new things.
Hmm.
Whether or not it cancels out or negates or rolls us back, to me, I actually see it as adding to it. It's more choices,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if I think it from a gender ID point of view, it's fantastic. If you're
Hmm.
non-binary, rock on. Like,
Yep.
here you go. This is what there is no shrink and pink and there's no pink and blue. Like,
Yeah.
this is what you need.
Hmm.
From a size and a fit perspective, are they a little more generous? Yeah, but you know what? Even as a plus size woman, maybe that's what I want, right? So
Hmm.
to me, like I said, I went through all those thoughts that you did, but it's just another option.
Yeah.
And
It's
I
another,
think
it's
that's great. If all we're looking for is choice, that's another choice.
absolutely, I think that's well said for sure. It's another choice. It's for another marginalized group of people to not
Yeah,
feel marginalized.
yeah.
Um, and whether it directly affects like anyone in the size inclusivity, it overall affects anyone, more
People as a
inclusivity. Yep,
whole.
exactly.
Yeah,
People as a whole. And it opens up the eyes of like other brands too, like REI being in the position to be able to take those steps and those risks, I think, will only help the smaller brands. Like it's kind of like the tester and like, okay,
right.
they did it, they opened the doors. Now like we know that it like people really, really want this,
Yeah,
and we can start going that way. And it definitely, I don't think by any means it's gonna like, oh, let's stop focusing over here. It's
right. It's
um
just one
widening the
more thing. And
horizon. Yeah.
yeah, and it's interesting because I know Old Navy started doing it. I don't know when they started it, but they've had kind of a unisex selection. It's mostly, I think, in like their fleeces and stuff,
Okay, yeah,
for
yeah.
quite some time too. So yeah, I think it's another opportunity. And even if you are plus sized, you can certainly shop that if that's what you're after as well.
Yeah.
It truly depends on your preference about how the clothes fit on your body.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what it's
So
all about. And having the function and features that you need to be able to do whatever activity or even just go to work, like just to be able to feel
yeah,
good in your own body.
and your own
Because
skin,
no
absolutely.
matter how much we talk about like accepting it, not giving what a shit what anyone else says, like you still might not care. But if you do put that piece of clothing on and feel good walking out the door, that That just
Yeah.
helps so much with confidence and attitude in anything. Well, thank you, Andrea, so much for your time. It's been amazing to talk to you and get a little insight into the industry and other things. I definitely learned some stuff and how things work with the industry and product development and things like that as well. And
It's your
anyone,
education for the day.
yeah, totally. So
Apparel 101.
exactly. We'll have your Instagram and website linked in the show notes. Tell people though where they can find you and get a hold of you, like your best places and anything else that you want to leave the people with.
Yeah, so makeplusequal.com is the website. There's a new blog there, so you can start keeping an eye on things I post there. The blog is actually called Through Plus Sized Eyes because it's really important for us to take a look through windows we may not have seen before. You can't fix something if you don't know there's a problem. So it's going to have a lot of perspective from a plus size person's point of view of living in an industry that's not necessarily size inclusive. Also on the website, if you are a brand who's interested, on the services page at the bottom, it actually lists the table of contents of topics that we can dive into if that's something that your team is looking for. So check out the site Make Plus Equal. And then I'm also Make Plus Equal on the gram.
Awesome.
And I'm not on TikTok because I think I'd be ashamed of my child if I even tried it.
I've tried that platform once in a while, and I don't know. It's definitely not my favorite, but yeah, Instagram is where we're usually at. So
Yeah.
that'll all be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much, Andrea. Again, I hope to have you on again because we could talk about so much
for
more.
sure.
Um,
For sure.
but for now, thank you, and everyone else out there. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and would do us a huge favor, since we don't have any sponsors or anything like that, and would rate and review us on whatever platform it is you use, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, whatever it is. And if you're listening and downloading just through the website, tearingituppodcast.com, leave comments. We'll definitely engage back with you. And on social media right now, we're just on Instagram. Tearing It Up Podcast is the handle. Like the post, share the post, comment on the post, whatever it is you got. Show us your love so we just stay relevant and show up in the rankings at all. So again, rate and review, please. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.